This course is presented to you free of charge by TTJ Tech Services of www.ttjtech.biz and by Stir It Up of www.stiritup.com. And remember, stir is spelled with a U, not an I, so that's STURITUP.com. TTJ Tech Services and Stir It Up are pleased to offer this course to you to the glory of God and to the benefit of all those who listen. Well, praise God. Thank you, Jesus. Well, glory to God. Hallelujah. And welcome, my friends, to iPad for All Computing. There we go. We just have 3 sessions left. It is unbelievable. Today, tomorrow, and the day after that. So today, tomorrow, and Thursday, if you're listening live. And we'll get these uploaded also, and you can come in live if you want or listen back. We are in the final week of our class here, but we still have a lot to talk about over these next 3 sessions. And where we're really going to focus is on all the other things that we can do with our devices that we didn't directly cover step by step. And I also want to let you know that our final session on Thursday, the 29th, just 2 days away, is going to be mostly a Q&A. We are going to do a wrap up, but it really is going to be a Q&A session. And so what I'm asking you to do is to please come up with some questions about things you want to know how to do or things you want clarification on with regards to the iPad or the Apple ecosystem. It's not so much a help session, right? It's more along the lines of, I'd like to be able to do X, Y, or Z. Is there an app for that? Or what do you recommend? Or how to, these kinds of things, right? But, we'll do what we can to answer as many questions as we can. But you're going to sort of direct the way that session goes on Thursday, our final session, by your questions. So please come up with some questions for us. And for these last 3, and today and tomorrow especially, we're going to be including a lot of third-party apps. And tomorrow is one of my favorite presentations to give. I call it A Day in the Connected Digital Life. That's the term that God gave me for this lifestyle that allows all of our stuff to be with us no matter where we go, our devices to almost be one step ahead of us in some regards, have everything ready when we expect it. And we're going to talk about what a day typically looks like for my family and me, both when it's summertime, as it's coming up now, the end of school, and also even when we're in school or they're in school and at work and so on, and how we do things, how we use technology. Because, really and truly, the best way to use technology is when the technology itself is not the central focus. I know that sounds crazy coming from a tech guy who spends a good portion of his days teaching or using technology. But the whole idea is that the technology ought to be a facilitator of whatever else it is that we're doing. And when you use it that way, you don't run into the problems that the naysayers tend to focus on, like, people are just obsessed with their phones and they've lost the ability to communicate. Unfortunately, there is a lot of that. I'm not disagreeing with them that that's a problem and that it does happen, but it doesn't have to happen. It's not automatic that technology causes that to happen if you keep technology in its proper place in the right perspective. The question is, are you a servant of the technology, or is the technology serving you? And of course, we want it to be the second one, and we can do that. And I'm going to kind of try to show you what that looks like in our presentation tomorrow. For today, we are going to be talking about the App Store and third-party apps. Going to talk a little bit about some best practices with the App Store. And then we're going to, and we did do that a little bit already last week, but I want to review those today. And then I also I'm going to do what I like to call what's on my iPad. And that is something. If you watch a lot of YouTube, there are technology YouTubers and so on who will do those. What's on my iPhone? What's on my iPad? And they'll what's on my Apple TV, and they'll just show you what each app is. And if it needs explaining, they'll explain it. So I'm going to do that today to show you the kinds of apps that I have. And I will even include some iPhone apps that maybe are not on my iPad, but I'm going to talk about that too, because that's going to relate to tomorrow's presentation. And so I want to sort of explain how I do things there. And if we have other instructors with us today, Sarah or Cliff, or whoever's here with us, I certainly want them to feel free to share what's on their iPads as well, or in Cliff's case, his iPhone, because he got the MacBook Air, as he shared with us, instead of an iPad right at the moment. But we're going to do this. And I just want to review these App Store best practices first. Now, I know we talked about these last week I think it was in the session on safety and security, staying safe in a digital world, but I want to review a few of these. And I want to start out by again saying, if you live in a place, this is not a political statement. It's not a criticism of anybody. I'm not even going to get into that. I want to operate in love, by grace, and I'm not going to get into all that. But I just want to say, if you live in a country that has required Apple to allow other means of installing apps, alternative app stores, or other ways to install, or if that ever happens in the United States, please keep in mind the benefits of using the official app store from Apple, because there are many. And the first benefit is that it's not possible in most cases to even install third-party apps. Now, there are some weird exceptions you can do if you have a business and you have what's called MDM, a managed Apple account, and like school districts and so forth. There are ways they can sort of, I don't know that the proper term is sideload, because I don't know that you're really sideloading apps in the United States, but they're sort of doing that in a sense. There are ways that you can do it in extreme situations, but for most of us, probably all of us, I would venture to guess, maybe not, but probably all of us in this class, we are limited to the walled garden of the App Store. And I like that, because that provides a lot of security, because every app that is installed on your device must then therefore come from the App Store, which means it has been vetted. Okay. Now, again, Apple is made up of humans. They make mistakes. Every once in a while, we've seen an app slip through that should not have gotten through, but Apple is very, very quick to respond to that, to pull the app, to deal with it the way that they need to. But because the apps are generally vetted quite well, and because of the requirements that app developers have, you're going to find apps that really do work. Now, you could get into an issue of, I don't like the way this app works. I don't like the way it's set up, or it's buggy. They haven't fixed all the crash issues, or, in the case of us as voiceover users, you certainly have a chance of, though it's not typical for mainstream apps, but it does happen on occasion, this app is not accessible with voiceover, right? I can't, and so you can run into those kinds of things. You can get into a discussion about which app is best. Give you a perfect example. Grocery lists is one of the things I always wanted to use my devices for ever since I was a little kid. And I had back then a telesensory Braille mate, for those who have been around long enough to know what that is. I used to use my Braille mate for grocery lists. And back then, you didn't have a grocery list feature. All you did was you made a new file. I would call it groceries, and I'd literally just type the groceries and delete the ones we bought when we bought them, right? There were no checklists or anything like that. But it was just always something that I enjoyed doing. And certainly when I got my first iPhone in 2009, one of the first app types that I looked for was a grocery list app. Well, my whole point in saying this, I'll tell you that I use the Reminders app now with its grocery list feature. If you must use a third-party app, I'll recommend one here later too. But I use the Reminders app with its grocery list feature. It works perfectly well. As far as I'm concerned, it's the best one I've used, and it does everything I need it to do. But the point is, there are probably dozens, if not more, of grocery list apps out there in the App Store. So you certainly can get into a discussion of, I like this one better than this one. And somebody else disagrees and says, no, I like that one best. Well, why? Well, because it has this feature. Maybe it syncs with iCloud. Maybe it has voice capabilities, so you can add groceries with your with your voice using, SIRI, or maybe for some people it needs to also work with ALEXA. So there are reasons that you may or may not choose a certain app, but at least you don't have to be concerned typically about this app is fraudulent, this app is stealing my data, this app is a virus. No, that stuff is typically not going to happen. As I said, there have been some random exceptions and they have been addressed very well, and praise God, Apple does what they say they're going to do. They care about us, and so they address that stuff quickly. But in general, you don't see that happen, and the app is going to do what it says that it does. It's going to do what the developer has said it's designed to do. You also get the benefit of the community aspect of things, whereas you have reviews. Now, I had told you the other day to take those with a grain of salt. You can go back and listen to that. I think it was the Staying Safe in a Digital World podcast episode from last week's session, one of the last week's sessions. But so I always take reviews with a grain of salt, but at least they're there. You can look at them if you want to, and you can write your own review and give your own rating, once you've tried the app. The other thing is you have a solid foundation for dealing with the app developer. Let's say you subscribe. Let's say there's an in-app subscription. You don't have to try to find the developer's contact info. You don't have to call or email or do anything else to deal with it. All you have one convenient place. It's under settings. It's under your name. Tap on settings and then tap on your name and then tap on subscriptions. You can see every subscription that you have subscribed to. You can see when it's going to auto renew. You can see what the price of the subscription is going to be. And should you decide that that subscription, for whatever reason, is not for you, you just tap on the subscription in question, go down to cancel, and in literally like 2 or 3 taps, you've canceled your subscription. You don't have to deal with anything else. It is that simple. And I really like that. So you have one convenient place to manage and view all your subscriptions that are done through Apple, through the in-app purchase mechanism. Now, certainly there are apps on the App Store that, for one reason or another, do not support in-app subscriptions. Certain services like TV, some of the TV streaming services and stuff, you have to go to their websites or what have you. And in fairness, that's mostly pretty easy and straightforward as well. But all the ones that are in-app subscriptions, you can manage them right there. So that's a very, very nice feature. Most all of the ones anyway. And then on top of all of that, the other thing you have is a convenient way to deal with any potential issues. I'll give you an example. I purchased an app one time, and honestly, I don't even remember the full name of it. And I really don't like to disparage anybody, so I probably wouldn't tell you even if I did, unless I felt that it would warn you to stay away from it. But I don't even know if the app still exists or if it's improved or not. It was some kind of an app filled with software instruments. Okay, so you remember how in GarageBand we could pick from, like a flute, a trumpet, a drum kit, an organ, a piano, hundreds of sounds really. And then one time several years ago, I found this pack that promised to expand that with an additional like 200 sounds or something. And they were supposed to, my understanding was, be compatible with GarageBand through the audio units plugin. I might be wrong about that, but I thought that at the time, I think they were. I think I wouldn't have probably gotten it otherwise unless I just wanted it for live playback. But you were supposed to go into this third-party app and pick an instrument, and then you could play it with your, your digital piano, soft, MIDI controller, whatever. Well, the app was just completely inaccessible. I think this was before screen recognition even. So you really couldn't even do that. But there was literally, and for those who know me or who have, been in our classes for a few years, that I'm pretty understanding when I call something. I don't use the term inaccessible lightly, right? If you can figure out what an app does, even if there's some unlabeled buttons, I'm not going to call that inaccessible. It may not be the best in the world, but it's usable. So when I say that this app was inaccessible, you could do nothing. Like, it must have been so graphical the way that it was designed that you couldn't even move around on the screen with VoiceOver. There was no way for me to independently use this app. So all I did was, and the thing was, it was an expensive purchase as apps go. Really wasn't that expensive. It wouldn't have hurt me at all. Praise God. We're blessed. It would have been fine. But it was sort of the principle of the thing, because it was like, I don't know if it was like 30 some dollars or $99, whatever it was. It was more than a typical app, right? If it had been $1.99, quite honestly, I'd have just let it go. But it was more than that, and it was completely inaccessible. And I don't want to pay that for an app that I'm not going to be able to use at all by myself. So I contacted Apple support, and at that time, I think you had to do it through the website, and then it was called iTunes Store Support, and you could chat. Now you can do it in like the Apple Support app and iMessage and all that. But anyhow, back then, so I contacted them and I did a chat with them, and I explained to them that the app is not accessible. And that particular person, everybody's a little bit different. That particular person said, "Have you tried contacting the app developer first?" And I said, "I'll be honest with you, no." I said, "I couldn't find easy contact information. And quite honestly, since it's completely inaccessible with VoiceOver, we know it's not something that's going to be solved, or that's likely to be solved, next week or something. It would take time, and I just really don't want to mess with it. And so they said, fine. They said, "We'll refund you. We'll issue a refund right now." And they did. And it was as simple as that. So that example proves that you have a clear path. You have somebody interceding on your behalf if necessary. You have somebody who can grant you refund if you need it. And so people always say, "Well, I don't want to spend money on an app if I don't know that it's going to be accessible." A lot of apps are free, right? But some are not. And so, I've heard that said before. But here's the thing: you really don't need to be concerned about it. If you think you might like the app, go ahead and get it. And then, not that I'm telling you what to do, but you try it. And if it's not accessible, just request a refund, and it will work. So lots and lots of benefits to the App Store. You don't have to worry about viruses. You don't have to worry about spyware. You don't have to worry about all these other things. And it's easy to manage your subscriptions and deal with, issues if they should arise. Usually they don't. Um, when you go to the App Store, there's a lot of ways that you can use the App Store. You can sort of browse. You can browse by category. You can look at the featured apps. The tab bar for the App Store is a floating tab bar near the top of the screen on an iPad. It is not at the bottom like it is on the iPhone. It's kind of like the TV or music apps when you have the sidebar hidden. But I don't think there is even an option of a sidebar in the App Store. But all the buttons, all the tabs are at the top on the left. And then to the right of all the tabs, you're going to find the My Account button that you can go in and you can view. That's another way to view your subscriptions and add money through. Well, actually, the add money thing, I think, is. Yeah, I think it is in there. There's an add money button in there, so you can manually add to your account. And there's also your updates under there. And so you can tap on My Account, and you can keep swiping to the right. You can find the upcoming automatic updates if you have that on. I always recommend doing a refresh, which is a 3-finger swipe down, like the pull to refresh, right? And then that's going to make sure all the updates load and you can see what they are, what's coming up, what the new features are, because you can read the release notes right there. And you can update right now. You don't have to wait. You can hit update all or update any of the ones you want to right now, even though if it says they're upcoming automatic, you can do it now, and then hit the done button when you're all finished. And the other thing is at the bottom of the screen in the App Store, I don't think it's under that account screen. I think there's a separate button still at the very bottom of the screen that says redeem. So if you get an Apple gift card, you can add it to your account that way. And you can, if it's a digital one, you can just click the link in the email or whatever. But if you have a physical one, you can scan it in, with your camera. You can, whatever the case may be. And so that's a nice feature as well. And just talk about, we talked earlier about family sharing at the beginning of this course. If you have family purchases, then, you can share those most often with the family. And that typically includes the subscriptions. Now, some are different. Like, for example, let's say Hulu, which I don't subscribe through the app anyway, because I have a Disney bundle that's actually managed by Verizon. But, that is one login. Everybody uses the same login and password, and then they just create separate profiles. So sometimes it's handled differently, but some of the subscriptions can just be shared, and definitely the purchases can be shared. Now, one of the things with purchase sharing, with family sharing, is that everybody must use the same payment method, and the organizer, the family organizer, the one who sets up the family sharing, must be responsible for all payments. So what happens when you're, like in our situation, when your child turns 18 and says to you, I want to use my own credit card because I want to build some credit? Because that's a big deal, right? If you want to get a loan for a house, a mortgage, a car, it's very difficult to get that as a newcomer onto the scene unless you build some credit. And a great way to build credit is to use a credit card, not to rack up a bunch of credit card debt, but rather to use it to make purchases that you can afford within your means and then pay it off each month, right? That's a great way to build credit. And there's your side little financial lesson for the day. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, so that's where my son is. He lives at home, and praise God, he's going to graduate in a couple of days here, but he's 18. He turned 18 in March, and he said, Dad, I want to build credit. And so I want to use my own credit card. And one of the things I want to use it for is Apple. And I said, well, son, you can't do that, because if you remove yourself from the family and use your own stuff, you won't have access to all the shared stuff that you like, that anybody else in the family has purchased. So the solution, as I thought about this, and I, God put this on my heart, I truly believe, I said, here's what you do. Use your own credit card and go buy an Apple gift card in the amount of X amount of dollars, whatever it may be, what you choose. And then load that onto your Apple account, because it will use that first before it uses the payment method. So I said, that's a workaround. You go out, get a gift card, put it on there, and then it'll use that. When that runs out, just buy another one, or reload it, depending on what kind it is, And so I said that will allow you that same, what you're looking for, the ability to use your own credit card and pay it off. And so that's the thing I suggested to him. So there's always ways to do that. If it is ever determined that it's appropriate that someone remove themselves or be removed from the family, you can do that. But just know that once you do that, they will not have access to any of the shared purchases that anyone else in the family has gotten. And you won't have access to their purchases either. So it separates that out. So just be aware of that if you use family sharing with kids and so on. All right. So that's a bit about the App Store. And I think everybody knows how to get apps from the App Store. Once you search for something or you find it, you can tap on the name of the app to view its app page, which will have the screenshots, the devices that it works with, the description of the app, the reviews, all the details about the in-app purchases, if there are any, the size of the app, all developer information, a whole bunch, privacy, nutrition labels, reports, all that stuff. It's all there on the app page. But there's also going to be a get button or a price if it's a fee app, and a paid app. So you can do that. And even if you don't open the app page, there's a button next to it, right? If you've already gotten it before, it'll say re-download, because they can just stay in iCloud and you can download them. And all of this is, pretty easy. And so I don't think we need to demonstrate it. You guys are advanced users. And just know that when you get an app, even if it's a free app, you may have to do your, Touch ID or Face ID or what have you. And it may say double click or whatever, just follow the instructions, and it's very straightforward. And then your app will get installed. It'll go to wherever it usually, if you've not done anything else, it's going to go to the very last position, or create a new page if it needs to. The exception to that is, let's say you have 4 pages, but you delete an app on page 2. Well, then it's going to put itself last on page 2. But, you can move apps around. We didn't do that in this particular class, but in our voiceover class, I'm pretty sure that we did. You can use the rotor to edit and move apps and create folders and all that sort of thing. And certainly you can use the app library as well if you don't know where an app has gone, or, what have you. Or even what it's called, because you can view the recently installed apps. Always pay attention to, when you open an app, what it asks for. It's going to, ask you a series of questions usually. during the onboarding, depending on the app. I mean, every app's different, but it may ask you, do you want to allow notifications? Do you want to allow location access? Do you want to allow Bluetooth access and local network? And most often the answer is yes, because you want the benefits of what the app can do. I'm not telling you what to do, though. It's personal preference. There really is no right or wrong. But just keep in mind, anything you don't allow may prevent something from working the way it was designed to work in the app. For example, an app that wants to access your location is accessing it for a reason, because again, Apple doesn't let people just have a free for all. There's a reason it wants location access. And if you read the screen, it will tell you what that reason is. Maybe, it's a weather app, and that's pretty obvious, or a directions app. That would be pretty obvious. Maybe some of them, it's not quite as obvious, but like they want to have, an app that has a shopping app, because maybe there's going to be different things available in different towns and cities, so you can decide. And there's a lot of granular control. You can allow full location access. You can have approximate location. Some apps will need microphone, camera, photos, music, calendar access, contacts, and you can often restrict these in different ways. You can always go into settings and privacy and turn them off later if you change your mind. The one that I probably don't usually allow, every once in a while I do, but usually I don't, is the one that says activity tracking, right? So what they want to do is be able to track your activity across other apps, so they can give you relevant ads based on what you look up, what you search, what your behaviors are. And I don't always allow that. I don't believe that they necessarily, it's not that well, let me put it this way. It's not that I believe it's malicious. It's not that I think they're spying on me. And it's certainly not that I'm doing anything that I would be concerned about anybody knowing about. It just kind of feels a little more than is necessary, in my opinion, most of the time. And so I don't tend to allow that. Every once in a while, if it's an app that I really, really know and trust the company very well, and I think that might be good reason to allow that, then okay, I will. But I don't know. It's just, that's the one I sometimes will say, ask app not to track. Um, Other than that, yeah, I usually, allow all the stuff they want me to allow, because again, if you don't, you're not going to get the full benefits of the app. I remember working one time with a group of people when I was contracted for a particular state, and we were teaching the Reminders app. And I showed everybody that you could create location-based reminders, as I talked about with all of you in this class. And we gave them some time to try it. And one person came back and said, well, it's not giving me the option to create a location-based reminder. And we very quickly realized that that person, when they first opened Reminders, did not allow location access. So I said, it's up to you. I said, you can go into settings and enable location access, or you just won't be able to participate in this exercise. Not a punishment, right? We're not mad at you. It's just, it's not going to work if you don't enable location services for that app. So, personal preference, certainly, but be aware that, and one of the big ones that people sometimes hesitate on is notifications. Oh, I don't really want notifications from that app. Well, again, no right or wrong, not judging anybody. It's none of my business, but I would think that through before you make a statement like that, because maybe you really do want notifications from that app. It's just that you don't understand what you're going to be notified about. And if you find that you do want notifications, but maybe they're too intrusive, you can go back later and disable them, or you can do the focus modes. We did a session on that a while back, and you can do notification summaries. You can turn off, you can restrict the notifications so they don't interrupt you. They just are relegated automatically to the lock screen or to the notification center. I've done that with, I think I did that with YouTube a while ago. At that time, they called it Deliver Quietly, because I was getting certain times of the day, like, 12 different, I'm just picking a number, but you know what I mean, like 12 different YouTube notifications, because people would upload stuff, and I didn't want to see that every time. So I just made it so that they're delivered quietly. So I still can see the notification later, but I have to look for it instead of being sort of interrupted by it. And of course, there's other ways too, with focus modes and so on, to determine when you receive notifications. All right. Now, the next thing that I would like to do is this wonderful little game of what's on my iPad. And I want to tell you first that I tend to do things differently on my iPhone than I do on my iPad. So there are some people who want the same exact setup on all their devices, right? They want the same apps, they want everything exactly the same. I tend not to really fit into that category. Now, there are some apps absolutely that are the same on both. But there are other apps that I specifically want to use on my iPhone and not on my iPad. The other thing is I have two iPads, praise God, and between the two, that is pretty much the same. I have most of the same apps on the two iPads. There's slight differences. I'll point out what those are. But yeah, I tend to do things differently on the iPad than I do on the phone. So bear with me just a moment here, and we're going to get started with this. Hold on just a moment or two of silence here. Now, I'm going to demonstrate, I'm going to go through these. I'm not going to use like original sound or anything because, yeah, I think I'm just going to go through. So, for starters, the other thing I want to tell you, I tend not to use, I tend to organize these. I'm not a big folders person. Trainer Cliff always jokingly makes fun of me because I don't use the mailboxes the way that he does. I tend to rely on the universal inbox, sort of the same thing with the apps. It's just personal preference. I kind of feel like if I have folders, then it just is another layer of complexity that I have to go through. So I tend to put things in an order that I like them and group the apps together by where they appear on the home screen. And we'll focus on what's on my iPad. I may later mention a few that are on my phone, especially tomorrow. But anyway, let's do this. All right, looking at the first page of my home screen is exactly the way I think exactly. Maybe I moved one app here or there, but I don't think so. It's pretty much exactly the way that Apple set it up, the way that it's shipped from Apple. Now that includes, let's see, I have some widgets here, don't I? All right, and my lock screen has widgets too. What do I have on my lock screen? I have the weather, the calendar, and is it news on this one? One of them, my daughter put the recipe app that I use. I'll talk about that shortly. But I think this one is the news. My home screen widgets on page 1 here. I have the clock. I have a notes widget, a photos widget, and a weather widget. And it shows me we're going to get a little rain here. It's got an hourly because these widgets can be bigger because the iPad screen is so large. You can have different sizes of widgets, and the small widget for the weather just kind of gives you the current conditions. In my case, this widget has the temperature and several hours of forecast. Okay, let's see what else. All these are the regular apps, as I said. I don't need to go through all those because not that they're not important. They are, and I like them and I use them every day, but I think you already know what they are. We've talked about most of them. I will tell you that my dock I think this is also the way that Apple set it up. It has messages. I think we did this before, actually. Messages, Safari, music, mail, calendar, photos, and notes on the left-hand side of the dock. And then, of course, the ones on the right change depending on what I'm doing. So page 2, if I go to page 2 on my iPad here, is still a lot of Apple apps. And it goes all the way through to the, the creativity apps, Clips, iMovie, GarageBand, Keynote, Numbers, Pages. And then we have I have a Texas Hold'em game that Apple makes. They actually make a game, if you didn't know that. And Swift Playground, which is an app that lets you work with the programming. So for those who know what Xcode is Apple's professional app development platform, their coding platform. If you're a developer and you want to make an app, you use Xcode. But they have Swift Playground, which allows you to actually learn coding on your iPad. And you can actually develop and submit apps to the App Store on your iPad from Swift Playground. Now, I think there are some limitations compared to Xcode on the Mac, and those may or may not remain in place as time goes by. I don't know, but it is there. So that's Swift Playground. I know we didn't teach that in this particular class, but it is fully accessible with VoiceOver. It starts out at a very rudimentary level, and you get to move this little guy on the screen called Byte, and you practice coding so that you can move him where you're supposed to move him to solve the puzzles and so forth. And it's kind of neat. So, and then you can go from there to developing full-fledged apps, and you can code for robots and I think drones and different kinds of things too. So it's a pretty powerful app. It's called Swift Playground. It is free. And I mentioned the Texas Hold'em here. Here's an app called Sketches School. That's the word sketches and then the word school, SCHOOL. The actual app is Sketches, but it's the school version, which is free. And it's designed for kids and family, but you can do a lot of drawing and sketching and different types of things in that. That was recommended by Apple a while ago, so I got it. Again, it is free, and you can use it with the Apple Pencil. And then I have the Apple Support app, which is very useful and allows you to look at support articles and schedule a callback or go to iMessage or otherwise get support. And then I have the YouTube app. The YouTube app, I think everybody knows what YouTube is. And I'll tell you what, I use that a lot. YouTube is really awesome and really powerful. And there's so much you can find. I have a client who was just talking about that the other day. He said, I can't believe how much stuff you can find in YouTube. Home repair, cooking, all kinds of things you want to find in YouTube. I'm telling you, you can find them in there, and a whole lot more fun entertainment stuff. I use it for devotionals and Bible teachings and a whole bunch of things. I mean, we could spend a whole, session or two learning YouTube if we wanted to, but it's fully accessible. And I think you're, again, as advanced users, probably already in a place where you don't really need much help in learning how to use it. But it is there. It's the last app on page 2 of my home screen. Going on here to page number 3, which I'm going to, this is where you're going to really start to see that, I have certain things in a specific order to sort of kind of group apps together rather than using folders. Now, page 2, as I said, ended with the YouTube app. On page 3, the first thing I have here is Yelp, OpenTable, Fandango, and Starbucks. Now, the first 3, Yelp, OpenTable, and Fandango, I had kind of initially installed, especially the first 2, as sort of extensions of SIRI, because some of the information, when you ask her, she actually gets that from Yelp, or Apple Maps can integrate with it. And so I like to be able to integrate. Of course, Yelp is allows me to find out business info about businesses around me and restaurants and so forth, or in any location. Open Table is restaurant reservations. And Fandango is the movie theater and movie ticket app. So that's useful. Now on my phone, I also have Uber. Don't have that on the iPad. And Starbucks, really, I probably could just use that on the iPhone and not on the iPad, but I like it on the iPad, and everybody knows what Starbucks is. All right, the next two are both Wikipedia apps. One is called Wikipedia. I think it's actually called Wikipedia Mobile, but its name on the home screen is Wikipedia. The other one is called Wikipanion, like Wikipanion. And that I got because it has some benefits for iPad users. It was specifically designed from the ground up, I believe, for the iPad. It syncs with iCloud. It works really, really well and displays articles when you want to look for them. You can search for articles on Wikipedia and other, like Wiktionary and other related sites as well, all in the Wikipanion app. It's very, very good. I like the way that it's laid out. But the standard Wikipedia app is also useful and accessible. And the nice thing about the standard one is it integrates with SIRI. So that's why I have both. Wolfram Alpha Classic allows you to look up different kinds of information. It's a reference tool. Again, sometimes Siri uses it, so I kind of have it on there so it can be quickly accessed for additional information if I want it. Okay, here's my recipe app called Ambre, Ambre. It's translated hungry or hunger. You say tango hambre in Spanish. Technically, what you're saying is I have hunger, but it's acceptable to say that means I am hungry. Well, if you want to use this with SIRI, you have to pronounce it amber, like the name amber or the color amber, instead of ombre, because that's how SIRI will say it, is amber, and that's actually how VoiceOver tends to say it. So you got to just get used to. So I call it the Amber app, even though it's really supposed to be ombre. But the Amber app is a wonderful recipe organizer. There's a whole bunch of different ways to get recipes into it. So you can manually type a recipe. You can dictate a recipe, not just with dictation, but it has its own like dictate feature in it. You can scan a recipe. You can import a recipe from other apps or from files, and you can import a recipe from a website. So if you go into Safari, and you let's say find like foodnetwork.com or all recipes, or one of these other ones, Epicurious, and you get a recipe on the screen. I think now under the share menu in Safari, there's actually an Amber option, but also you can just copy the URL, and then you go into Amber and there's a way to import or to paste the URL of the recipe, and it will import the recipe. And what's nice about it is, as some of you may know who use the iPad for recipes a lot of recipe websites tend to have a ton of ads. Because they really need to monetize. If everybody's just grabbing their recipes, right? That doesn't. So one of two things happens. You're either going to get half of the recipe and then you have to subscribe, or in more cases than not, you can see the whole recipe, but it's just littered with ads. And you can try reader mode in Safari. Reader, as you know, is great, and it eliminates a lot of that ads and stuff. But what can happen with recipes is that sometimes when you go to reader mode, it actually takes out it eliminates part of the recipe as well. And then you don't get everything that you want. So I really like Amber because it'll actually parse the information and give me the ingredients where they belong and the instructions where they belong. And so if you paste that URL into Amber, it'll do all that for you, and then you can save the recipe in your library. They also have a gallery of recipes from the users, and you can access that. Now, the beautiful thing about this app, it includes recipe scaling. So if the recipe is for 8 and you're going to be having 16 people, you can scale the recipe. That was an obvious one because you could just double it, but you get the point. It has iCloud syncing, so it syncs with all your devices. It has collaboration support, so you can share the recipe collaboratively with others. And then one of the nice things that it has is it's one of the very few recipe apps to have true SIRI support. So it will work on your HomePod with shortcuts. And you can say, for example, and that's why you need to say amber, because it doesn't work if you say ombre. But if you say amber next instruction or amber ingredients, whatever, once you bring up the HUD or the heads up display, which allows you to do hands-free cooking, in the Amber app, you can actually even get out of the app, and it has support for live activities. So you'll see the instructions on your lock screen. If you're using an iPhone, you'll see them in the dynamic island if you have that. But also, again, you can use your HomePod or SIRI on the device itself, on the iPad or whatever, and say Amber next instruction or whatever. And it will read it to you orally so you can hear it. It'll set timers when it needs to for cooking time. And it just is a really, really solid app. And they even have an Apple TV app so you can have recipes on the big screen. And that's kind of neat too. All right, so that's Amber, AMBRE. There is a subscription. It's not very much. I don't remember if it's like $11 a year or $5 a year. I don't even remember. It's worth it. And I don't remember what the difference is, even whether it's no ads or I don't know, but it was worth it. Next up is Sirius XM, and everybody knows what that is, right? So we have a Sirius XM in-app subscription. We have it in our car and stuff too. But anyway, it's a very nice app. Now the Bible app, I think its official name is YouVersion Bible, YOU. But I really like this app. This is the app that I use both for my own Bible studies and devotionals, as well as for when I'm teaching and preaching. It allows you to look up multiple Bible translations, and it's got devotionals in it, and they've got some video stories, and it's just a really great Bible app. Okay. Tasty and Epicurious. These are both apps that let me access additional recipes and save recipes, but it's particularly good for its own, because that's an actual recipe site, right? So they're going to have all kinds of recipe categories and everything you can find in here in both of those, really. Okay, Home Design 3D is not an app that I personally use very much. I think it is more just, I'm trying to remember. I don't want to go on record as saying it's not accessible because I don't remember. It's been a while since I've even used it, but the family, you can do really cool things as a family. We've done, like you can put photos and furniture in different rooms and see what that's like and all that, as I say, home design. So that's nice. And, excuse me, they're getting a bunch of notifications. Okay, here we go. Let's see. All right, I have several food ordering and shopping apps in a row here. I'm just going to say them. Taco Bell. Oh, DoorDash. Then Taco Bell. Walmart. Amazon. Best Buy. I don't have the Amazon Alexa app on my iPad, but I do on my iPhone. Again, I do things differently on each device, certain things. But yeah, so I use the Walmart. You can use Walmart with SIRI, or I should say you can use SIRI with Walmart. And I mentioned the Amazon and all those and Taco Bell. So those are, you know what all those do, I think. All right, here's my group of TV apps now. DirecTV, which is for my DirecTV stream live TV service that we have as a family. Here's Hulu, Max, Netflix, Peacock, Disney Plus, Paramount Plus. So we have all of those. Next, I have Sketchbook, which is a high-end sketching and drawing app. Again, mostly the kids use that, but you can use it with the Apple Pencil and so on. And then same thing with these next couple here. Brushes, which is a painting app. Again, really the kids, but still. Art Studio Pro, same deal there. Procreate, same deal, but that's a very high-end app. Again, recommended by Apple. Canva, which you've probably seen commercials for. It's a design app. You can make, brochures, logos, different kinds of things. And that's it on that page. Now we'll go to the next page where we're going to find some more professional apps. And I will tell you that this iPad that I hold in my hands right now does not have Final Cut Pro or Logic Pro, but I do have it on the other iPad. And the only reason I didn't put it on this one is because the storage space on the other one is double what it is on this one. And so I kept that to the iPad that has more storage. But you can use this on any iPad. You don't need an iPad Pro or even an M series iPad anymore. The A16 iPad will run Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro just fine. I think that Logic Pro was never required to be on the M series, but Final Cut Pro used to be. And then they have Final Cut Camera, which lets you use your device to control and feed video into Final Cut on another iPad or what have you. So there's 3 apps there, but let's go. Okay. Oh, here we go. This is okay. So I mentioned to you that there is a third-party video editing app called LumaFusion. I do have that, just in case I need to do some things that I may prefer to do in that app. I don't usually use it. I usually use Clips and, if anything, iMovie. But the LumaFusion app does have some advanced features and does have its own library of sound effects and stuff too. So that's always good. And here's Ferrite Recording Studio, followed by Backpack Studio. We are going to be, as I mentioned to you, doing an audio course later on in the year, and we'll definitely be covering both of those along with GarageBand and voice memos, and Trainer Cliff will cover some Mac equivalents to that stuff. I use Ferrite almost every day. When I am publishing the recordings that you hear on the podcast, we put a little music at the beginning, at the end. Sometimes we edit things out in the middle or otherwise. And Ferrite is an excellent audio editing app. You say, well, why don't you use GarageBand? I thought it was accessible. Well, it is. It is accessible. But it's also very complex and has a lot of other features besides just the audio editing. And so what is nice about Ferrite is it is extremely targeted for audio editing. It is extremely targeted for that purpose, and it doesn't have all the other stuff. So when I want, and it's got some nice voiceover stuff in it. So I use Ferrite for post-production. All right. Now, the Backpack Studio is sort of the reciprocal of Ferrite, where Ferrite is all about, or a lot about, post-production. Backpack is for like a straight through one shot deal. You can pause and resume, but there's really no editing and no post-production. It's designed for live recording, radio station, DJ, that kind of thing. But I like it because it has sound pads, sort of like the DJ carts, where you put the appropriate card in for the sounds and so forth. And it's kind of like that. And I use it when I'm recording things where I want to be able to quickly insert sounds, because I can just tap on the screen on the sound I want, or I can even assign it to a key on the keyboard temporarily or what have you. And it just is really nice. So I do a lot of recording in Backpack, actually, because it's just, I can insert that stuff in Ferrite, and it's very accessible and very easy. I can insert that stuff in GarageBand, but it's even quicker if I just have to press number 1 on the keyboard and it puts applause or whatever. So sometimes I'll record in Backpack and then bring it into Ferrite before, it just depends. But those 2 apps I use very, very often. And then we also have, let me see. Oh yeah, here's a group of very high-end productivity apps. There's some accessibility, but again, it's mostly sighted family that would use these. These are the Seraph Labs Affinity bundle, which includes Affinity Photo, Affinity Designer, and Affinity Publisher. And to be technical about it, it's version 2 with all of those: Photo 2, Publisher 2, Designer 2. Very, very high end. Photo is the photo editor. Designer 2 is like the vector design app, and Publisher 2 is like, again, desktop publishing. You want to make, brochures and banners and that sort of thing. They're very high end. I think that was a $99 purchase for that bundle, but it also includes a Mac version as well. So you get a lot for your money there, and all the updates. I don't know what they'll do when they come to version 3, if they'll, make you buy it again or if it'll continue. But anyway, okay. And then Pixelmator and Photomator, also very, very high-end photo editing apps. Now we've got Zoom. Everybody knows what Zoom is. You're in it right now. Okay. Universe, the website builder. Oh, yes. Designed from the ground up for iPad and iPhone. And though there have been off and on some little issues along the way, it's actually very accessible with VoiceOver. And they really care about VoiceOver accessibility. And it allows me to design websites. It allows me to have the newsletter, to take payments with Apple Pay, print shipping labels. It's a whole e-commerce solution. Trainer Cliff and I both use it. I'll talk a little bit more about it tomorrow when we talk about what's a day in the connected digital life. But Universe is a very, very solid website builder. I highly recommend it. I have an app here that shows up on the home screen as Video Converter. If somebody needs the exact name of it, I'm going to have to go in and find it in the App Store because I think there's a little more to the name. But this allows me to, for example, convert video to audio or convert from one format to another. And that can be very useful. Maybe I make a screen recording of a video and I need to just extract the audio from it or something of that nature. So that's why I have this app, and it works very well with VoiceOver and does a great job. All right, here's the two Meta apps, Business Suite and Facebook. Everybody knows what Facebook does, and Business Suite allows you to manage the business page that you have on Facebook. So that's good. Here's Chat GPT, which we already demonstrated a week or two ago, somewhere in there. And so I've got that app. Oh, here's Duolingo, the language learning app. Started that back in 2020. And, it allows you to do daily language practice. They even have math and music in there. And I think now they've started a chess learning module as well, which is very interesting. Oh, excuse me. I guess somebody's. No, I don't actually think. Not yet. I don't know what I don't know what she heard, but anyway, now she stopped barking. I don't know. All right. I don't know. Let's see what else. Okay. Oh, here's an app called. Let's see. Here's an app called Jotform. Now that's like J as in Juliet, O as in Oscar, T as in Tango. Okay, so occasionally I have situations where I need to have a registration form that is not attached to Zoom or anything. Like, for example, our Faith Summit that's coming up July 23rd through the 26th here in beautiful Bedford County. If you are a believer in Christ or you want to experience God's love and power and get a lot of questions answered, a deep Bible study and fellowship with other believers and so on, you really ought to come to this Faith Summit. We're so blessed, and we're such a wonderful area here, wonderful people, great sights to see, great restaurants, a lot of activities. But the pinnacle of all of that's going to be the Faith Summit, and we're expecting a great move of God there. Anyhow, that we use a registration form to let people sign up. It's free. And technically you don't need to register, but we're going to have a picnic on the last day, and we want to know if you're coming to the picnic, so we make sure we have enough food to feed you. So we did a form, and you can use Google Forms, but it's not all that accessible. Again, maybe that's a bit harsh. But I find it to be a bit overwhelming. And then I found an app that I tried to use with Google Forms that did simplify it a little bit, but it just wasn't my favorite. So I kept looking, and I finally found, praise God, Jotform, which allows me to create forms, publish them to the web, and they're stored on the Jotform site, but you can link to them or embed them. I forget how I did it, but it works very, very well. And so that's the form app that I use to create forms if I need to. I have, again, we're going to get into some apps now that are mostly for the kids. I mean, I play these with the kids, but they're the ones holding the iPad when we do it, so they're not necessarily as accessible. But I've always enjoyed just being part of it with the family and listening to the app experience and so on as well. So a few of those. Here's the Elements, which is actually a beautiful interactive periodic table. It would take a while to tell you, or for me to even remember all of the features of this app, but I do know that it was one of the first apps of its kind developed for the iPad, and to this day is just a fantastic app. I believe it's actually based on a book of the same title. Here we have X-Plane. That is a flight simulator and a really good one at that. And here's a fun app I kind of have for nostalgia purposes because it was one of the first apps I got when I had my first iPad. It's called Chalkboard. You can draw and color in chalk, but it also makes the sound of the chalk on the chalkboard, which is cool. Thankfully, I don't think they have the sound of fingernails on the chalkboard. Here's Magic Piano. Again, you can play on screen or hook it up to a MIDI device. Again, a lot of these games that the kids have, and some of these are really, really old that the kids have kind of outgrown, but I kept them for nostalgia reasons, like Cookie Doodle that lets you make cookies and popcorn and soda and all these different ones and milkshakes. And then there's this tie-dye one. So there's a whole bunch like that I'll sort of hot dogs, milkshakes, snow cones. But let's go to page 5 and show you some of the other, pizza. Yeah, don't forget about making pizza. And then don't forget about lollipops. And here's the hair color booth. There's a whole bunch of these different ones. I wanted to tell you about the Fair Food Maker and the Islands, which is a splash and sprinkle game. Again, they've sort of outgrown these, but sometimes we still open them up for fun. Now, here's Sky Guide, which allows you to see what's in the sky and learn about the planets and different things like that. And there's a series shortcut for that too. And here's one I wanted to tell you about. The Apple Arcade. Now, that's a case where I did create a folder, and I'm not going to go through everything in it because there are 18 apps in there, and most of them are, again, things that the kids use, but just some highlights there: Sneaky Sasquatch and What the Golf and Cricket Through the Ages. There's some really, really fun ones. Okay, here's an app that is accessible, and it is a game, but it's called Akinator, and it's like Akinator's like supposed to be like a genie, but what you do is you think of a character, and it could be a real person in history. It could be a fictional character from a show or a movie, or you can even do like your own pet or your own brother or sister or something. And Akinator is going to ask questions and try to figure out who it is that you are thinking of. And I'll tell you what, it is amazing. It really almost all the time guesses who it is. It's pretty impressive. And that one does work with voiceover. And here's Heads Up, which is also a fun kind of like guess, sort of like the headbands game, right? It shows a name, and you have to ask questions. Other people see who you are, but you don't know who you have on there, and then you ask questions to try to identify what character you have. Or maybe it's not only a character, maybe a household item or a food or a place or something. Here's a really old game that was first made for PC in the 90s. It's called Myst, M-Y-S-T, and they've ported this over to iPad. It is a very intense role play adventure game, and you'd want to have sighted assistance for this, but that is really cool. And then here's now some accessible: Quizoid, which is trivia; Riddle Quiz, which is more like brain teasers; 5-second guess, which is like it'll give you 5 seconds to name, let's say, 3 summer fruits or 3 countries that start with the letter C or something. It's harder than it sounds because you're limited to 5 seconds and when the pressure's on, but it's accessible, and my daughter and I play it a lot. Sketch Party, that works with the Apple TV, so it's kind of like win, lose, or draw. For those who know what that is, you draw using your finger or the Apple Pencil on your iPad, and the drawing shows up on TV, and you have to get somebody on your team to guess what it is you're drawing. And here's Prismo, which allows you to scan documents and import PDFs and turn them into text and all kinds of. It's a very, very powerful PDF and text app. A lot of that stuff is built in now, but I still like the Prismo app. Sometimes it goes above and beyond. And here's the Disney World app that lets you manage Disney World reservations and order food when you're at Disney World, make reservations for the parks and different things. And here's the Hershey Park app, which we use because we go to Hershey Park a good bit. All right. My daughter put a couple extra games on here. And then I have, I guess that's really it. Because this is Typacy, which is a typing app. That's really it. So as you can see, there's a lot of apps that I have. They all serve different purposes. And I mentioned to you that my phone has some apps that my iPad doesn't, and vice versa. Tomorrow, we'll talk about a day in the connected digital life, and you'll see some of that. But some of the ones that my iPhone has that are business related are the payment system apps, both QuickBooks and Square Point of Sale. Although I will be honest with you, I'm relying more and more on QuickBooks and less on Square Point of Sale. QuickBooks is phenomenal. It is a paid subscription, so I do pay every month for QuickBooks, but it is worth it. It's super accessible. It's way more than I need in a um, management app like that because it has things that I don't even use. But for invoicing, creating links for people to pay, taking credit cards, even without a reader now, it's got the tap to pay built in. It's just incredible. And the invoices that people get, my paying customers can tell you, they're fully accessible. I mean, it's beautiful how well they work, which is what made me get it in the first place, because I was invoiced by someone for a job that they did fixing our garage door. And they sent me this invoice, and I was amazed how accessible it was and how easy it was. I said, I got to figure out what payment system they use. And I quickly found out it was QuickBooks. And I mean, I'm pretty sure I subscribed to it that day. That's how good it was. So I really, really highly recommend it if you're running a business. And, you can do all that on the iPad. As you can see, we can build websites, we can take payments, we can, unzip and zip files, we can print things out, we can work with servers, we can, all sorts of stuff like that. So that's one of the things I have on my phone that I don't have on my iPad. I also use the FedEx mobile app on my phone a good bit. It has some issues, but you can get around them with screen recognition, and it works where it really needs to. And it, allows me to schedule pickups when I'm shipping to customers. And of course, I can track things that are coming to me as well. You have to have a FedEx account, but yeah. Um, and some additional food ordering apps that are on my phone that are not on my iPad. Those kinds of things. As I said, clearly there are apps that are on my iPad that are not on my phone as well. And then there's some overlap, but um, I just wanted to highlight a few, and I may think of more tomorrow when we're talking about a day in the connected digital life. But that's what's on my iPad, and I want to go back in here and see if the other instructors have anything to add if they're here. But I hope that gives you kind of an idea, and I'm anxious to hear your questions. All right, let's see what other instructors we've got. I'll be there in a moment. Here we go. Great crowd, praise God. Here's trainer Sarah. Let's get her unmuted. And Sarah, you are good to go.
Hi,
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good.
Awesome, awesome.
I
Have
don't
a
have nearly as many apps on my iPad as you do. I have all the sort of typical the Zoom and um, all those kind of platforms on there. I have, Pages, of course. I mean, that's a native app, but still, that's what I
right.
use a lot. I have Dragon. I think it's called Dragon Speak, but I haven't used that in years. Um, that was a dictation app for writing. Um, I have Merlin Bird ID. Um, do you use that?
No, I was just going to ask you. I just saw something about that the other day on our list, but I didn't read it because I don't use the app. So what does that do?
It's well, I've had it for several years, and in the beginning it wasn't that helpful to me because you really sort of had to, it wasn't as you really had to be close to the bird, but basically once you start recording the bird, it will identify the bird and tell you the colorations and what kind of bird and what kind of area it comes from, where it's native to. And but now it's gotten a lot better. And you don't really have to be that close anymore. And it will identify several birds around, like I know that when you're on your porch or veranda, we always hear a lot of birds. And so it will identify all of the birds. Um,
That's really
Also,
interesting.
yeah, I think there may be a paid version of it. I don't have the paid version. So, in fact, there is, and obviously it's going to be better, more information and all that kind of stuff. Um, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that
Um,
sounds really neat.
there is a like a plant identifier, and now I can't remember what it's called because it only is paid, but it would be good to, use the iPad and it's sort of
Yeah, I
to
had one or two of those at one point, and I don't remember. I had two different ones. I think one was called like Garden Answer or something, and I forget what the
yeah,
other one was. Um, and now also, the iPhone with the camera control, or even the 15 Pro without the camera control, has that thing they call visual intelligence, and it
right,
seems to because my mom has used it to identify. I think she used it to identify a plant the other day or something like that too. So some of that is even kind of built in now too. But yeah,
right, right. My brother is doing or he did a master class, um, a master gardener class, and so he's using the one that you pay $40 a year for, which I'm not going to do, but his was, when we were in Spain, he was taking pictures of all these different trees and different plants, and that was kind of cool. But that was,
yeah,
he was using his phone,
right,
um,
right,
which is easier to go drag around. Um, what else do I have on my iPad? Well, books folders,
right.
um, Bard and also, Kindle. I have the Kindle app there.
So you kind of use three, then you use Apple Books and Bard and Kindle, then just depending on what it is you're looking at the time, right?
Right, and whatever's available.
And
Yeah.
whatever's
And
available. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And and you can import, all sorts of things to the
Oh,
books app.
absolutely, absolutely.
So articles and PDFs and all that kind of stuff.
It's really funny about books. Just a side story for fun. I the other day ran across this book because, of course, I wrote the Titanic book and everything. But the other
Yeah.
day, I ran across this book called Back to Titanic, and it was a fictional book, and it was kind of like a romance novel, but it was almost like a science fiction thing too. Like this lady was transported through time back to the Titanic and stuff, and it was a book that like I would normally not read something like that. And I don't mean that in like a critical way. People like
Right.
what they like. It's just I don't normally do that. I don't tend to read books that are, and but I got this book because it was like had the Titanic and and I ended up reading the entire book, like 200 and some pages in one day because it was just absolutely riveting. I couldn't believe that I sat there and read this like every chance I got in between things. I was reading this thing.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You know what's good? I mean, that's what's great about book clubs, is that you read things that you wouldn't ordinarily read,
Right, right.
like you can say, I don't like sci-fi, and then you come across a book that you really like, and that happens to be sci-fi.
That's right. That's it. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So I think I was going through, as you were talking, I was going through my iPad, and now I'm probably forgetting all the ones that I found, but for the most part, it's really just, I'm using the native apps, and I'm for the most part, email and um you know and writing. So so I do have Word on there, um, which really I don't use. Just I have it there just in case.
I was gonna say we have to disown you now. No.
No, I swear I have not touched
Yeah.
it in
Yeah.
years.
I'm gonna need a screenshot of your app switcher. No, I'm just kidding.
You're gonna sue me, right?
No, yeah, some people just as a, and I mean, some people need it for their work or whatever it is they do. I mean,
Yeah,
and it's nice
yeah,
to know that it's available. I mean, that's the
yeah,
good part. You have the choice.
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
But for the most part, I mean, you can change back and forth just on
oh yeah,
pages,
yeah, yep,
and and on the the Files app, which I use all the time,
right,
because
right.
you can put all sorts of stuff on there.
Oh my, yes.
Thanks for joining today's session. Didn't get your question answered? Have an additional comment or feedback? Email us info@ttjtech.biz or info@stiritup.com. And remember, stir is spelled with a U. That's STURITUP.com. Or check out our websites for additional resources. That's ttjtech.biz or stiritup.com. And remember, subscribe to the newsletter when you're there. That way, you don't miss out on any upcoming announcements or events. Thanks for joining us. God bless, and see you next time.